So ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, today we have somebody who needs very little introduction, but it is my duty as host to introduce him. He's the reason why we have Jio, Flipkart, Airtel, and so many other things that you're utilizing today. The reason why you are listening to this on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. Now, all of you must be wondering, saying he's not Mark Zuckerberg, he's not Mukesh Ambani, so how is he responsible? Well, let me tell you, for the ones who do not know him, he's the man who's taken a rupee salary from the Prime Minister for advising him on something that all of us are now combined through. He is regarded as the father of Indian telecommunication and has spent about 55 years in the field. He's advisor to multiple Indian prime ministers. He served as advisor, and he is chairman of the Indian National Congress, the Overseas Congress, and the man who quite literally governs the World Wide Web in one way as we know it. He's in fact a board member of the foundation that actually oversees it. Someone who is revered not just for his intellect, but also for his witty remarks. It is a pleasure and an honor to be able to do this with you, sir. Welcome, Dr. Sam Pitroda, to IIM's author series.
Thank you, Rishabh. Thank you for inviting. I want to thank Prakash Bhai Shah, who introduced me to you. I want to thank him also for the opportunity, and thank all of your viewers for spending time from their busy schedule to come participate in this program.
So in fact, Ambassador Shah is joining us on Instagram as one of those thousands of viewers who are logging in and who've told me all these, he's told me all these fascinating stories about you. But if I may ask you one question, because many of the viewers are young people who've only read about you, and probably this is the first time that are getting a chance to interact with you. So, sir, your journey as a telecommunication expert, something that you are known for, and now what you see today as what it's come to, the use of the internet and how we are connected. So if you had to describe that entire journey in a sentence, how would you describe the journey of the last 55 years?
Exciting, rewarding, adventurous, fulfilling, and a joy.
And a joy.
See, just to give you quick background.
Right, sir.
I was born and raised in 1942.
Right, sir.
During British Raj, in a small little tribal village in Orissa of Gujarati parents, brought up under Gandhian values, went to a small boarding school in Gujarat, then went to college in Baroda, and then one day read in the newspaper about President Kennedy deciding to send man onto the moon. Got all excited as a young man and took a boat to come to America, which traveled from Mumbai to Karachi to Aden to Egypt to Genova, Naples, and took a train from Italy to London, took a plane from London to New York, and a bus from New York to Chicago. This was 55 years ago. I had a girlfriend in India from college days. So my goal was to really get her here and get married soon. Right. So in a year, I finished my master's degree. I had a master's in physics from India.
Right.
She came here. We got married. This was about 54 years ago. Started many companies in America, built a family. I have 7 brothers and sisters. They all came here one by one. My parents came here, died here. And then in between, I had an opportunity to work in India through Mrs. Indira Gandhi, then with Rajiv Gandhi. This was 1980s, 81. And I convinced both of them that we could change face of India if we focus on IT and telecom. These were early days. People had never heard of C language programming, microprocessors. We brought all that and trained thousands and thousands of young people in India from IITs and other universities. I remember Infosys had 5 people. I remember Wipro had 8 people. So those were the early days. But a lot of people contributed, especially young talent in India, to build foundation for telecom in India. The key was to build human resource and focus on Indian model of development, indigenous development, local talent, rural exchange, STD PCOs, digital technology, our own software. Then we had 2 million telephones. Today, India has 1.2 billion phones. So I think credit goes to lots of people, including entrepreneurs, government policymakers. Rajiv Gandhi provided political will, which was the key to really launch IT revolution in India. So that's a brief story. Then I came back, then I had a heart attack, quadruple bypass, Rajiv Gandhi died. I came back to US, but then I had given up my US nationality. So I came as an Indian citizen again. Then when Manmohan Singh government came in, I went back again and worked with Dr. Manmohan Singh for 10 years almost on Knowledge Commission, innovation, and Digital India. And then when BJP government came in, I again came back to US and I run several foundations, write books, and lots of interesting things. Thank you.
And write very many interesting books, one which is coming out very soon. And that was, you beautifully captured your entire journey, and very humbly, I might say so, because you're responsible for much of what happens in India even today. And people speak about you very, very, very highly. And like I said, it's, but let me talk.
People are very generous. People are very generous. I thank them for all the love and affection I get. And I tell you, I feel proud of what is youth or what young people bring to Indian talent.
No, sir, but you did mention a very interesting point where you did speak about the fact that you returned after the demise of Rajiv Gandhi, and you also returned after Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. Whenever it was a BJP establishment, you've gone back because sometimes you, and this is what I've understood, that of course your beliefs and principles and your ideology is very different from what theirs is. But say in your book, Redesign the World, and if I may ask a question from that book, sir, you have written about the last world order. You've spoken about democracy, capitalism, human rights, consumption, and military. And so you mentioned that this was a manifesto of the West to rule the world. So many in our country and in the current establishment, in fact, feel the same. They feel that we were blindly towing the West, and Jawaharlal Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi ji both were also in a way, subscribing to the Western ideology, and which is why India is where it is, as against what they would like us to believe that India would be. They feel that, and in your book, what I'm understanding is that you also subscribe to the same thing, wherein not necessarily where when it comes to the progress that India has made from 1947 to now, but when it comes to at least the fact that these are the 5 things that were conceptualized by the West in order to govern the rest of the world. So your thoughts on this? Is it similar to what Prime Minister Modi is also saying in India today?
No, it is misunderstood. It is not represented properly. The contribution US made to the world in terms of rule-based system is amazing. That design, which focus on democracy, human rights, capitalism, consumption, and military, has achieved a great deal. It gave peace to the world after World War II. It gave technology. Democracies flourished all over the world. And it created wealth for a large number of people, lifted millions out of poverty. So there are good things to that design. It is not that that design was not proper. But now the time has come to re-examine that. Because now we live in a hyper-connected world. Hyperconnectivity brings about democratization of information, knowledge, decentralization of decision-making, implementation, and demonetization. Hyperconnectivity is all about content, about curation of content, and it's about context. So today, with hyperconnectivity, I think the advantages we have to redesign the world are unique. It is not that that design was bad. That design was badly needed. That design served its purpose. We need a new design now, but that new design cannot be based on authoritarian regime. That new design cannot be based on curbing freedom. That new design cannot be based on lies. That new design cannot be based on propagating religion, dividing people. Okay, so I think we got to be very clear what has been accomplished, what tools are available today, and what can be accomplished tomorrow. Another key area is really the larger picture, which go beyond nationality. And that is all about what is good for Earth, what is good for planet, and what is good for people. The book is really about these two fundamental issues. As far as I'm concerned, at the end of the day, only two things matter. What is good for planet? This includes peace, environment, water, air, energy, forests, rivers, animals, because we are all interconnected, interwoven, interdependent. And if we don't take care of planet, we are not really taking care of ourselves. See, the point is, we are not there for planet. Planet is there for us. Planet will survive without us, but we can't survive without planet. So that requires complete redesign with focus on sustainability. Then people, irrespective of who we are, what religion we follow, what color, language, location, customs, traditions we belong to, we are all human beings. We all must be treated with respect, dignity, equal opportunity, and that's all about inclusion. So these two things, sustainability and inclusion, are the key to taking humanity to the next level. So in this book, I basically talk about what was the design at World War II. Right after that design, according to me, 7 things happen that require us to redesign the world. First one was decolonization. Right after 42, and the design was conceived just about the time I was born, 79 years ago. Okay. That design did not think of decolonization. So right after the design, decolonization led by Mahatma Gandhi in India, basically decolonized the entire world in a very short period of time. All of a sudden, billions of people's aspirations changed. Ambitious change. My own father, who had 4th grade education, would have never thought of sending all his children to English school. He was poor. But after India got independence, he felt empowered that I'm free. I can do anything. My children can study English. And it happened to millions of us. Okay. We don't understand that phenomena of freedom. Then came rise of China. No one thought China will move this fast. Then came fall of Soviet Union. Then in parallel, rise of technology. Transistor was born after I was born. I've experimented with vacuum tubes, transistors. I've seen the birth of microprocessor, all of these languages, computers, laptops, smartphones. I've seen it all, fortunately or unfortunately. And the role of technology has been tremendous in the last 75 years. And we have to give credit to America for that. Then came simultaneously rise of inequality. Very few people very rich and lots of people very poor. Then came 9/11, when America became the only superpower. 9/11 attack changed American mindset. America started looking inward. And then finally came COVID-19, which says we are all interconnected. We will be all treated same way, irrespective of which nationality, which age group, which color, which religion. So you better understand the importance of nature. And these 7 events tell me, especially COVID-19, that we must rethink the paradigm. It is an opportunity to change the paradigm. All you can do is begin new conversation. I'm not going to change the world. I know that. We all begin new conversation, And I want to thank young people for joining in on this conversation, which is the first conversation on the book, which is to be released by Penguin, launched by Penguin on 26th. It is already available on Amazon.com and other online services. It will be launched in India, US, and UK. So the key is for the young people to understand a lot of these ideas and demand what is good for their future and not get sucked into the past.
Fair.
See, we tend to spend too much time on past, talk about our history and Ram Bhagwan and this and that. That's not going to generate future. Okay, it's okay. It's good to have past. But I'm not going to get hung up on past. Okay, I'm not going to waste my time on past rituals and all that. I want to look forward. I have eyes in front and not in the back. So I got to look forward.
So firstly, on behalf of all the young people who are watching, we feel very humbled and quite honored to be able to do the first conversation on your book. In regards to what you mentioned about, and you again articulated very well a few points and the need for redesigning the world. But one of the things which I think is, if you don't know where you've come from, sir, then it's almost impossible to know where you're going. So therefore,
you should know where you come from, but
right,
you don't get stuck up.
Fair, sir.
That's all. We all come from Africa.
Right, sir.
Okay.
Right.
So let's not forget that.
Right.
We all were same.
Correct.
Our genes and genes of apes,
right,
are 98% common. Okay. So you can't say I come from Hindu religion. You can't get stuck there. That's my point. Okay.
But so the concept of one world, isn't it the same concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which also
of course, that's good. I agree. Then implement it now.
So which is promoted at the end of the day by the Hindutva ideology. They also say Bharatvarsha is the centerpiece to one world, and we need to combine the world in
practice. That's all. Practice. Don't distinguish between people. Don't talk about religion too much. Don't, penalize people who don't follow your, values. Just practice. It's good. I'm all for it, but I don't want to get hung up on that conversation.
Got it.
I want to talk about future. I want to talk about technology. I want to talk about employment. I want to talk about growth, prosperity. Jobs are very important to young people. Okay. I want to talk about the world of 2200 and what role we can play. I want to visualize future. See, people tend to go to past because it is comfortable. Okay, you know what happened. Future is sometimes painful because you have to survive on a day-to-day basis. Thinking about complications. Present may be comfortable for some. But the key is to really articulate future and show a path to young people so that they see in that path their future.
So very well said once again, but I'm going to probe the last time on this one, and then I'll move to the future, because the future is as important as the present, and in my humble opinion, also some part of the past. But so you're not against, let me get this correct. From my little understanding of reading the book,
I'm not against anything.
No, you're not against the Hindutva way.
No, I'm not against anything. I'm for everything.
Okay.
You decide what you want. Okay. I don't care, but I decide what I want. And you shouldn't care. Okay. So I think what I'm saying is freedom is all about freedom of thought, freedom of action. But in that freedom, you got to treat everybody with respect, dignity, whether it's women or people with different religion, different language, different color, different caste. How do we treat our, Dalits?
Fair.
How do we treat our tribals? Okay.
Fair.
Fix that. And then talk about religion.
Fair.
Okay. Don't talk to me about religion. I'm not interested in it.
Fair.
Okay.
And sir, but in terms of freedom, you mentioned also in terms of freedom, that one should respect somebody else's freedom, and it's a two-way street. In this, I must ask you, because this is primarily an Indian audience who are politically sensitized, who are sensitized to what is happening currently. And as I will touch upon a few things that are written in your book about this as well, but more specifically in the case of the concept of democracy. And in our country, some people believe that there is too much of democracy. Do you think that there is too much of democracy ever? And
there is not too much of democracy. In fact, democracy is being hijacked.
So the reason why I asked this question before you answer it, I'm sorry to interrupt, is because I see some leaders, and this is again, a lot of young people have contributed to these questions, so these are not all mine, so I can't take the blame or all the credit, but leaders such as Farooq Abdullah, who basically said that China should help us in solving the Kashmir dispute, when technically everybody knows that Aksai Chin also, China is a part of the territory, they're trying to claim the territory. So to make such kind of statements, don't you think that then is slightly against national interest, and is going and is just utilizing the concept of democracy in a way that it should not be? Or do you think that it's...
you have to ask Farooq Abdullah.
Right.
Okay, not me.
Okay. But and in regards to the question of democracy, is there ever too much of democracy, or that's...
There is never too much of democracy if it is responsible democracy. Okay. See, democracy is all about empowering human being. Democracy to me is the bedrock of human potential. Okay, when you tell me what I can do and what I cannot do, you are curbing my potential. Okay, democracy is all about, it is fundamental to fulfillment. Okay, at the end of the day, three things matter in my life. Love for everybody. Cat to dog to animal to brother to cousin to nephew to my enemy. Work. Work is not necessarily about telecom. Work is about sweeping floor, cooking, painting, music, traveling. That's work. Okay. And third is fulfillment. I cannot have fulfillment if there is no democracy, because then somebody is going to tell me what I can do and what I can't do. I want to follow rule of law. I want to follow what is good for the humanity, what is good for the planet. But I got to have the option. Okay. And that's why democracy is very important. And with hyperconnectivity, you are really empowering everybody. You see, this has changed everything. This says I'm empowered to get my education, my music. Don't tell me what music I should listen to. Okay. This is part of democracy. Okay. So democracy, you have to understand, is a broader concept. It is about decentralization. Democracy is about, at the end of the day, empowering me to do what I want to do. I want to select my journey. But in the process, I can't hurt anybody. I can't hurt environment. So there are certain rules and regulations I need to follow. I can't steal. I can't lie. I can't cheat. Okay. I can't discriminate people. That is what democracy is. On one hand, you talk about it, and then on the other hand, you lie about it. Okay. That's not democracy. So it all depends on how you look at it. Okay. These are my views.
Right.
You don't have to agree with it 100%. And I respect you for disagreeing with me. One thing I would do is agree to disagree with you. But with great respect, love and affection, concerns and care, and I'll always remain friends.
And that's the thing that I think a lot of our political leaders across party lines must learn from you. That if you agree to disagree, but you do it with respect and yet continue to remain friends, then I think we can handle the pandemic much better than we have in the country as a whole. But then again, sir,
we need civilized conversation.
But civilized, when it and again taking civilized conversations to the international context. So, are there civilized conversations possible in institutions such as the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, which put one country above the other, where what eventually does happen is when people agree to disagree, the person who disagrees has something that's called the veto power, or has something in terms of an unfair advantage, like even in the WTO, where certain countries have unfair advantages. Are all these international multilateral organizations a reflection of the power structure that was? And do you think that this needs to be radically reformed if they have to be relevant today?
That is what this book is about.
Right.
At the end of the day, this book talks about the fact that there are 5 pillars of the old design.
Right.
Democracy, human rights, capitalism, consumption, and military. The new 5 pillars of the design need to be clearly understood, articulated, and ultimately implemented. What are the new 5 pillars? Take democracy to inclusion. None of the democracies today in the world are inclusive. America is not inclusive. You look at what happened to Black Lives Matter. India is not inclusive. Look at what is happening to Dalits and other minorities. China is not inclusive. No one has a democracy that is inclusive. So that has to be the foundation. Take democracy to inclusion. It may take 50 years. Second, take human rights to human needs. Today we can produce anything, but we wind up producing for people who can afford to buy and not for people who need it. These are all fundamental ideas. So we really need to make sure that everybody in this world has enough to eat, wear clothes, have a shelter. We can do that. We have enough money. We spend $2 trillion a year on military to kill people. If we spend that much on healthcare, education, food, world problems will be sorted out. All of the fights in the world in the past have all been about exclusion. So you focus on inclusion, world would be at peace. Third, so you got to take human rights to human needs. Third, capitalism has gone haywire because of greed, manipulation. Rich have become too rich. Lots of people have remained poor. So we need new capitalism. Free market is good. Entrepreneurship is to be celebrated. But we need not just focus on GDP. We need focus on gross environmental product, gross human development product. That's what this book is about. Then we need to take consumption to conservation and sustainability. We need to conserve our environment, water, energy, all of that. And then finally, it is time as human race to stop thinking about fighting and military and start thinking about non-violence. Non-violence at home, non-violence in communities, non-violence in cities, non-violence between states. We can do it. We are now matured as a civilization because of the technology and mainly this technology. For the first time in the human history, we are all connected. People are connected now. What does this connectivity mean? What can we do with this connectivity? I think those are the things discussed in the book.
So, but if I may, this young people are watching this, and I think young people are the most naive, but also believe in bringing about change and actually try to go about bringing that change. So as somebody, and with very little experience in comparison to the decades that you have, so I've seen both our parliaments with many students from the organization now joining different political parties and also some working in the United Nations and so on and so forth. So for the last decade, when I've seen this progress, I've seen that what you mentioned is something that all of the people set out to achieve. Your book, in many a way, is like a utopian wish list at the start, sir. But when you go through the process and the grind of the bureaucracy, the parliament and the United Nations and these multilateral institutions, then at that juncture, sir, I see that sense of despondency coming in even amongst the younger leaders who are today in their 30s, in their late 30s or their late 20s. Why do you think this is happening and how can we address this? Because sir, there's very little to disagree with what you've said, but how can young people actually go about achieving things like this when actually it's one against 500 in, say, the parliament, or one against 193 nations in the United Nations?
I think first thing is to have inner strength. Your core has to be intact. You cannot allow our core to be corrupted. What is your core? What do you believe in? Do you believe in democracy? Do you believe in truth? Do you believe in trust, love, inclusion, diversity? Don't allow your core to be corrupted. People give in too early because they want short-term gains. You almost have to be Gandhian. You have to be tough and you got to build strong self. Most of the people have very fragile self-esteem. They all get hurt very easily. They tend to compare. This guy has this, I don't have that. Okay. And I think that's where you fall apart. If you stick to your core values, fight it. It is a fight. Either you join them or you continue to fight. Most of the people join them early. If you don't have the fighting spirit, fine, that's your choice. Okay. But if you don't fight, who will fight? You can't complain that there is no change if you don't change. Okay. You don't want to change. You want the world to change. It's a funny thing. Okay. So I've gone through it in my life. I'm almost 80 years old, and I tell you, I had never had a need to lie. Okay. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do. There is price to be paid. You pay that price. Okay. I never had to call anybody to get admission for my children. I would not do that. Okay. Never taken anything from anybody. Not that I'm great. That's not the point. Point is, you got to believe in certain things. And if you believe in it, fight for it, you've done your job. So first thing is, if you read this book and your thought is, oh, it is utopian, then I think what you are saying to me is, I'm not ready to change. I will give in now. That's what you're telling me. Okay, in a nice way.
No,
okay.
no. What I
don't mean anybody who says, I'm saying you got to fight for it. Right. Nothing easy. Remember, independence did not come easy. Don't forget.
Right.
Gandhiji fought for decolonization for the world. Look at his character. Look at his determination. Look at his values. Look at his clarity. Okay. And one man can change lots of things. So if there are lots of young people like you all, you can change the world. But if you then become like your uncle or cousin or nephew, who is, driving Mercedes and cheating and lying and not paying tax and all that, then choice is yours.
As long as you're not talking about my uncle, my nephew, it's all right, because they drive, one of them drives a Mercedes. But
not that everybody who drives Mercedes is not good. That's not the point.
No, I would have liked, I would have much liked to know that. Was
sharing my thoughts.
Right, no. What I also wanted to ask you, sir, and you did mention that be the change that you want to see. And I think that's so very important. At the organization also, sir, we've changed from Indian International Model UN to India's international movement to United Nations. And the main reason has been because we've seen that the UN gets caught up in so many things in terms of the bureaucracy, and because it's representative, and this is something that you touch upon on in your book as well, is representative of member states. It's not a global government per se. There is no global constitution, there is no global governance, and therefore there is no global government. The United Nations also faces this as a major issue when it comes to sending their peacekeeping forces who are yet with a pistol and with a shield, as against terrorists. Also, some having not having ballistic missiles and weapons per se. So the problem which we are also facing, and the reason why we changed, is because it's very difficult to have the United Nations do anything on ground. So to that end, my question is, do you think, sir, it's time to completely shift from the existing power structure of the United Nations and come up with a global government of sort? Because you do touch upon this. It's a very radical idea, but do you think this is the need of the hour?
First of all of these global institutions were set up 75 years ago.
Right.
UN, World Bank, IMF, NATO, WTO, whatever.
Okay. Right.
In 75 years, we have basically not created one new global institution of that order. Okay. That doesn't make sense. What you're saying is the world has not changed in 75 years.
Correct.
So all of these institutions were designed not necessarily with today's scenario in mind. They were designed with the scenario of 40s.
Right.
So we need to restructure these institutions. We need to re-examine their purpose. We need to repurpose them. Okay. And we need to create new global institutions at the same time. I'll give you one simple example. I file a lot of patents. And I have hundreds of patents, and I first file a patent in US. Then I have to file in multiple countries through PCT. Each country wants my patent to be translated in Japanese, Chinese, whatever, Italian. And then each country decides what is patented and what is not patented. In a globalized world, we should have one international code saying if this is an invention, this applies everywhere.
Correct.
Okay. But we don't do it because there is vested interest. So that is an example of creating new global institution. We have 130 different currencies in the world or more than that. Do we really need all that currency? Some country of 5 million people have their own currency. Does it make sense anymore? We need to question these things. We definitely need, according to me, global constitution. Some minimum constitution which respects earth and people. So can we say we all agree to this idea of planet? So when Amazon jungles are affected, it is not a Brazilian problem.
Correct.
It is a global problem. Okay. If something happens to Himalaya, it is not just Indian issue. It is a global issue because it is a global heritage. So we need common minimum understanding of global constitution. Even if we can start with 10, 20 items. Okay. And then you need some kind of a virtual organization to execute on this. Today, UN cannot execute much of it.
Right.
Okay. So you need understanding of who execute what. For example, World Bank can execute. IMF can execute. But UN can't execute. It is all, you take, sustainable development goals. They're all aspirational.
Very true.
Okay.
Right.
We had earlier millennium or development goal. Nothing happened. Okay. I mean, these are good ideas. A friend of mine, Jeffrey Sachs, drives these things. Great guy, wonderful human being, has wonderful ideas. But then what happens at the end? And those are the issues I'm talking about re-examining.
So if I may, and if I may ask you this question, you said that those are the ideas that need re-examining. So even in, not just outside the UN, even in the World Trade Organization, we classify American and European subsidies for agriculture to an amber box, and they are not up for discussion. But when it comes to India's PDS, which is intended to serve the poor, at the end of the day, we are continuously criticized and sometimes ostracized. But yet India has this obsession with the United Nations. India has this obsession with the WTO, with these global institutions. And whenever we criticize this, then it's said that then some in your party and across the country, across the world, say that India has now become inward looking. Now we have become right-wing nationalists, and therefore we don't care for the world.
You can't look at these things in isolation. Okay, you've got to go back to equality, inclusion,
right,
fair conversation. Everyone has to be treated equally. So it is not about just this idea. So you can't take things out of context. Okay. You got to go back to fundamentals. Okay. And if you don't get to fundamentals, the conversation gets diverted in wrong direction. Okay.
Right. This is not a very serious, hard talk BBC show, and it's not Karan Thapar's Devil Advocate, which is why I'm going to end my part of the questioning with a light-hearted set of questions. So what's the first thought that comes to your mind when somebody says food? I'm going to take it away from the book for a bit and going to try to know the man, Dr. Sam Pitroda. So what's the first thought, Dr. Pitroda, that comes to your mind when I say food?
Eat.
When I say environment?
Keep it clean.
When I say painting?
Enjoy.
When I say India?
Country I was born in.
Vasudeva Kutumbakam?
World is my family.
And when I say redesign the world,
change
okay,
for good. Change for good.
change for good. And when I say Bharatiya Janata Party
Just one political party.
and Prime Minister Modi,
Just one prime minister.
lack of opposition in India,
Situation as you see it today.
and the last one, because the entire book surrounds this, democracy.
Fundamental to fulfillment, human fulfillment.
Fundamental to human fulfillment. And this is outside the questions that I had prepared, but I must ask you this because of your love towards young people and the youth, because you mentioned us so very many times. When I say youth, what's the first thought that comes to your mind?
Energy, enthusiasm, expectations, excitement. Because I have young children. I have a son who is 45-year-old. I have a daughter who is 42-year-old. I have I have grandchildren, 3 grandchildren, 10, 5, and 5 months.
Oh, shit.
Future. That's the excitement. They have the energy. Okay. And I believe in them. They are like my joy in life. And all young people. I have benefited from their energy all my life. CDOT in India delivered only because of young talent and young energy. I get credit for it. But it is the energy and enthusiasm and hard work of young that gets things done. Okay.
Right. And all young people look towards the right guidance. And I'm glad that this conversation has provided many insights, not just to your book, but what young people should be doing. But let me take, with your permission, a couple of questions from the live audience who are watching across social media platforms. There's one that comes in from Instagram, which says, what are the areas of focus when it comes to technology in India? Should India invest in research for areas like artificial intelligence, blockchain, etc.?
See, technology is not just about IT, software, telecom. Technology is also about biotech, nanotech, materials. IT is one piece. There is a technology for gadgets, and there is technology for people. We got to have good combination. What is the idea of technology? It is basically to improve comfort for all of us. That's what technology is all about. Whether it is air conditioning, computer, laptop, train, plane, it is comfort. But along with comfort should come wellness. If you're not well, what good is comfort? So wellness technology is equally important as much as it is for comfort. So comfort and wellness technologies go hand in hand. And, big data analytics, AI is just a small little piece of the puzzle. It's a tool.
It's a small little piece.
One thing I want to say is
Right.
all of you, looking at your, age and body language, will live to be 150 years or 120 years minimum. Guarantee. You can remember me when you are 120. Because by the time you get into trouble, which is another 20, 30 years, technology would be so far advanced that you'll be put on a production line and your body part would be replaced like they replace in auto. Look, I'm 80-year-old. I had 2 quadruple bypasses. I had cancer. And I'm doing great, thanks to technology. So you will live to be at least 120 or 130. Guaranteed. So plan accordingly. Don't plan as if you're going to live to be 70. Okay, you have another 100 years to go. Work it out. Okay. That is the beauty of technology of tomorrow.
Wow. If I may ask this one question, that what do you see 2200 as? Now you've got me very interested. You said this generation is going to live to 120. People say this generation is going to live to 35, not to 135. So now that you say that this is the case, in 2200, what do you see the world of 2200 as?
I am very positive. If you think positive, positive things happen.
Hmm.
If you think negative, negative things happen. So I would start with being very positive. I think 2200 environment would be much better. Our rivers would be less polluted. We'll have more forest. We'll have more animal. Because of all the technology, we'll be able to bring some of the animals that we have lost back through genetic technology. Okay. People will live longer. People will have more comfort. People will respect each other better. And that's what this design is. Okay. Inclusive, democratic, non-violence at peace. I think it is possible to build this so-called, what you said, utopian world. Utopian world. Okay, not Ethiopian.
Okay. Right.
And, it is possible to do that. Okay.
Right. You're a very optimistic man, and I think that is what young people love the most when they see this kind of optimism, especially from somebody as
you have to make it happen.
Hmm.
You have to make it happen. I won't be around. Okay. But you would be, I can assure you, you'll be around at 2200, guaranteed. Okay. So figure it out what you want to see then. It's your job.
Well, I don't know whether that's a good thing to be around in 2200 or not, but I'm always going to try to. One thing I felt is going to be positive.
It's a great thing to be around.
Let me just be great. I was just going to say that.
Let's fix this first. It is a great thing to be around. Okay. Life has to be celebrated.
Right.
Okay. You can't say, is it good thing to be around? Of course, it is good thing for you to be around in 2300.
I was saying that one thing that I've learned is to look at, the question is always whether to see the glass half full or half empty. Today I got the answer.
But that is always half full. Always. Okay. You got to have enthusiasm in life. Life is such a gift to live, enjoy, meet people, learn, experience, watch. I mean, look at the sensation we have. I mean, you can see great paintings and you can listen to great music and you can have great conversations with friends. You get great food to eat and you meet variety of people. My God, what a joy it is to have this life.
What a joy it is to have this life. And that, I think, is a perfect note to end this conversation, because young people should look forward to the future, not to just the past. As much as the past will teach you about what to expect in the future, like Dr. Pitroda said, focus on the future because the future is bright. And to all the young people who have joined in, thank you very much, because it's a Sunday evening, but I would like to thank our guest because it's Sunday morning at 8 a.m. in Chicago. And he's taken our time on a Sunday morning in order to do this. Heart filled with gratitude.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks all your colleagues for listening and spending time. And I wish you all the best. And again, thanks to Prakash Bhai.
And to Ambassador Shah for making this connection and making this happen. And but the one thing that I'd like to leave all the viewers today and the ones who are going to be watching this across social media as well is, it's often said that a conversation with a knowledgeable man is better than reading 100 books. This conversation is, of course, better than reading the 100 books. But from the little that I've read,
read the book.
But that's what I'm saying. But
it's available on Amazon.com.
But this book is as good as 1,000 conversations, because it actually just opens your mind up to so very many things that we all think about, but at the end of the day, don't do much about. He's actually penned it down. And I think if, as young people, we start working towards it, we sooner or later will have at least some global goals which we can actually achieve and which we just don't call sustainable development goals. So It's a pleasure and an honor. Very, very grateful on behalf of everyone at the organization and all our advisors. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks. Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining.